your fuse as a young man and made you have to tell stories on screen?
So I was about 15 or 16 and already had a healthy love of cinema and film, and a mother who took me to a lot of art house, my father who took me to a lot of blockbuster type films. So I was being taken to, Ladri di Biciclette by my mum and Rocky 2 by my dad, getting a good balance of the potential of cinema. And a film came out in the UK called My Beautiful Laundrette, which is, I think, was Daniel Day-Lewis's first lead. And I'd never seen a film that took part in the London that I was growing up in and had characters in it of all nationalities that I was growing up around. I grew up in Southeast London, so there were all sorts of nationalities and ethnic backgrounds in that community. And here was a film about people I knew and recognized. And it was done so plausibly, and it chimed with me because I suddenly realized that cinematic storytelling could also be something on your doorstep as opposed to something other, something beyond your dreams, or something out there. And obviously Daniel Day-Lewis's performance, he managed to bring out the threat of this disaffected, borderline fascist kind of thug, and then the intimacy of this gay relationship that he has with his school friend who is of Indian nationality, and so he's sort of crossing the line of loyalties. It just really struck me at quite a formative age, and made me realize that perhaps I could work in film as an actor. Prior to that, theater really was my focus.
Well, now, what movie or series, and it might come down to a performance, did you watch that was so good it made you question, man, can I ever rise to this level?
Coming up in the year, in the 80s and 90s, the careers of Day-Lewis, who I mentioned, Sean Penn, Gary Oldman, were hugely influential on me. These were guys making films, changing shape, changing voices, changing types, challenging themselves, appearing sometimes in smaller roles. Sean Penn and Gary Oldman in particular were really great at popping up in films that were not necessarily, they weren't the leads in, but had some, had seen something in a role they wanted to try out. And all of them seemed to always do something that took you away from trying to really realize who they were and realize the potential of losing yourself in a part. Therefore, there was a confidence and a technique that at the time I remember thinking, I have to work harder. I have to work harder and be braver.
Was there a go-to performance movie by Gary Oldman and Sean Penn that really was a North Star for you?
Sean Penn was probably Dead Man Walking. Gary Oldman, it's really hard. Oh, he did a film, I remember, with Sean, didn't he?
State of Grace, right?
State of Grace. I remember seeing that and being blown away because I hadn't seen him with an American accent before.
Well, now, maybe it was a success of something you did or approval from someone whose opinion really mattered to you. What first gave you the feeling that, in fact, you should be doing this and you could belong?
I really think that came from my relationship with Anthony Minghella. Prior to working on The Talented Mr. Ripley, I had made a few films. I felt like I was still really learning how to swim in that pool. I had a certain amount of confidence in what I was capable of, but didn't feel like I'd necessarily been seen for who I was. And Anthony really nurtured my sense of self on film, the required amount of responsibility it takes to be a lead in a film. And, by the time we were doing our third film together, it just gave me this incredible belief in myself, because the variety of parts he cast me in and the emotional demands in all three were such that I suddenly felt like I was his leading man, and therefore worthy of a certain amount of self belief.
And what was the most helpful advice he gave you as you developed this unusual relationship with Matt Damon's character in that film, Ripley?
I remember something he used to say to me quite frequently was, "You're enough." I think what he meant by that was, he believed in preparation and the hard work that goes in prior to production. But when you're there and when you're rolling a camera, at some point you have to let go and you have to also sort of step in. And again, a lot of that is to do with self-belief. And I think his advice was always that, you're ready and you're here and you're enough.
And what would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to allow you to turn these performances that influenced you to your own language as an actor?
I think it always comes down to self-belief. I know I've used that phrase before, but to me, it's getting to a point, or it was getting to a point where the people I was working with were of a status that finally gave me the confidence to listen to my own intuition. I think working with the people that I was fortunate enough to work with, also demonstrating how hard they work and the levels, the extent they'd go to get something right, was a learning curve for me to reflect on and for me to find the self-confidence to go to those ends, to really try and push one's boundaries and push oneself as an artist, try new things. So it was a dialogue with myself, I suppose, in following my gut, following my curiosity, and really feeling like I had something to offer.
Maybe there was a specific movie where you felt like, all right, I got this.
I mean, in truth, I don't know that ever happens. I mean, I think it's getting easier. The last couple of years, I felt much more confident in my approach and what I need to put myself through, or what I need to do to get ready. It's like you do a 360-degree check of the past, the present, the sort of physical, the external, the internal of a character. And unless you've got that checkpoint done, unless I have got that checkpoint down, I can't really move on, or I'm not ready. That's become easier. It's become more familiar. Maybe I'm used to it. Doesn't mean that playing the parts gets any easier, but the preparation is now more like a process. But I still wouldn't say there's one that I've walked away from and I've gone past it. I definitely say in the last couple of years, working on Firebrand was a real turning point. Working on The Order with Justin Kurzel, that comes out later this year, that was a real turning point. And indeed Eden, which I did with Ron Howard this year. So it's just been in the last couple of years. Maybe it's turning 50, I don't know.
Tell me, what burned in you about the way Firebrand was framed that made you have to tell this story?
We think we know, or have seen in different versions, chapters of Henry's life leading up to this. I don't know that anyone's done a film about this very last page. But I love the challenge. I really saw in front of me the challenge of trying to hint at all those other Henrys, the young, dashing Henry, the musical Henry, the sporting Henry, the humorous Henry, the terrifying Henry, and really try and carry the weight of all of those on the shoulders of this dying, rotting man, and the bitterness and the disappointment he has really with himself. And he's looking desperately to blame someone, and ultimately, he's really only blaming himself. And I love that. If I could ground that, if I could give you a sense of understanding of what that might have been like emotionally, physically, spiritually for him, you really then understood what this extraordinary woman was up against. And I mean, she had no choice in marrying him. She was instructed to marry him.
The other thing is now, so you say you turned 50, and some of the best parts of your performance display an absolute lack of vanity. Was there a moment where you just said, I'm going to let go?
Absolutely. It was that way. It was clear from the get-go, whether it was getting the physical look right or really trying to find the truth in his behavior and in finding the truth in his discomfort, to try and explain, not apologize for, but explain his behavior. All of that meant you had to just dive in and commit, which I always enjoy doing anyway. I just never been given an opportunity to do it to such a degree.
Yeah, well, it's going to be very interesting to watch your career over the next 20 years, I would say.
Thank you. Thanks so much.